Welcome to English Story Hub. Learn English through fun stories. Improve vocabulary, listening, and speaking skills. Like, subscribe, and keep learning with us. Mysteries of the Unexplained. Part 3. Off the ground and stay in the air with no help. Most reports of this are about religious people. The most famous story from Europe is of an Englishman, Daniel Douglas Home. In 1868, while people watched, he flew out of a third-floor window. He then flew back into the building through an open window in another room. Asian countries have many stories like this. A Tibetan religious man, Milarepa, slept, ate, and walked in the air. Ghost houses. In 1863, a large house was built next to Borley Church, near the town of Berry Street, Edmonds. The house became famous because many strange things happened there. There were noises. Things flew through the air. Some people heard a person walking through the house. Ghosts were seen. The most famous ghost was a young woman. Her ghost was often seen in the gardens. In 1928, Leonel and Marianne Foister moved into the house. Marianne immediately hated the dark, ugly building. Soon after they moved in, frightening things began to happen. When a ghost wrote messages to Marianne on the walls, photographs were taken. Local people didn't believe Marianne's stories, but more than 2,000 mysterious things were reported during the Foisters' 5-year stay. When the house was destroyed in a fire in 1939, that seemed to be the end of the story. Then local people began to talk about strange things happening in Borley Church. In 1974, the BBC filmed Borley Church. They put sound equipment inside and watched the church. They heard loud noises, people talking, a door opening and closing, heavy footsteps. But the door didn't open or close and they found no one. All the sound equipment in the church was destroyed. One night, 2 of the BBC filmmakers saw the ghost of the young woman in the garden. They watched her for 12 minutes. Denny Densham from the BBC said, "I can't explain what I've seen at Borley." Since the BBC visit, many more mysterious things have happened at Borley Church. You can visit the church on your next trip to England if you are brave enough. A house in Norfolk, England, is famous for the ghost called the Brown Lady. She was first seen in 1835, very late at night. She wore a beautiful brown dress and her face shone with light. But she had no eyes, only 2 black holes. In 1936, 2 photographers from Country Life magazine came to take photographs of the house. They saw the brown lady moving up the stairs. They were very frightened, but they took this famous photograph. It is one of the best photographs of a ghost. Since this time nobody has seen the brown lady in the house. Did the photo frighten her away? Around the world, every country has famous ghosts and ghost stories. Some countries have similar ghosts but with different names. Do you have any of these ghosts in your country? India. An Akari is the ghost of a little girl who lives in the mountains. She comes into the villages at night to make the children sick. Children wear pieces of red cotton round their necks to protect them from the Akari. In many European stories, people also wear red to protect themselves from bad ghosts. Japan has many ghosts. The Birubaru is the ghost of fear. It lives in dark forests and looks like a shaking old man or woman, often with one eye. The Birubaru jumps on a person's back. The person suddenly feels very cold and dies of fear. The faceless woman was first seen in Tokyo hundreds of years ago. A man was walking home one night when he saw a woman crying. He tried to help her, but she couldn't stop crying. She finally turned towards him, and she had no face. He screamed and ran away. He ran until he saw an old man on the road. He told him about the woman's face. "Was it like this?" asked the old man as he turned round. He too had no face. The word poltergeist comes from German and means noisy ghost. How does a ghost become a poltergeist? Perhaps if a person dies in a terrible way, their ghost stays angry after their death. A poltergeist stayed in a man's office in Germany for a year. It destroyed furniture, threw things, turned lights on and off, and moved pictures round the walls. It also made hundreds of expensive telephone calls. Experts discovered that it was angry with the secretary. When she moved away, the activity stopped. The Muslim world. The Tsar is known in Muslim countries. It is a man-hating ghost. It comes into a house and makes a wife crazy. As a result, she shouts at her husband all the time. There is only one way to send the Tsar away. The husband must be very kind to his wife and give her expensive presents. Russia. Domoviks live behind the cooker. When a family moves house, they welcome the Domovik to his new home with a fire in the cooker. The Domovik looks after the house. But if you make him angry, he will burn your house down. A rusalka is the ghost of a young woman who has died in water. Rusalkas are beautiful, with long green hair. They live in lakes and rivers and secretly help poor, hard-working fishermen. Past lives. Have you ever thought, I've been to this place before, or Tvi already met this person? Here are some stories of people who lived complete lives in other times. Bridie Murphy. Virginia Tighe was the wife of a businessman in Wisconsin, in the US. But this wasn't her only life. 100 years before, she was a young Irish woman called Bridie Murphy. Virginia's story is one of the most famous in the world. Why have so many experts believed her? Virginia never traveled and knew nothing about Ireland, but she knew many important things about Bridie's life and town. The language, the names of local shops and people, the type of money, even popular songs. Experts have checked Virginia's story for over 30 years. They haven't proved that it isn't true. Shanti Devi. Shanti Devi was born in 1926 in Delhi, India. When she was 4 years old, she began to talk about her other life as a wife and mother in the town of Mathura. She said things like, "This was my husband's favorite food." She remembered many things about her life in Mathura. Her husband wore glasses and had a clothes shop. She died when she had her second baby. At 9 years old, Shanti remembered her husband's name, Pandit Kedarnath Chal. Shanti's parents wrote to him and invited him to their house. Shanti knew him immediately. She then wanted to go back to her old home. Family and friends went with her. When they arrived in Mathura, she saw her husband's brother. She immediately knew who he was. She found her old house without help. She knew where her bedroom was. She found some of her things there. Pandit agreed that they were hers. Shanti's story interested people all over the world. Mahatma Gandhi invited her to his home. But Shanti always missed her first life and never married. She died sad and lonely. The Pollock children. In 1957, sadness came to the Pollock family of Hexham, England. The only children, 2 sisters, were killed by a car. The Pollocks found happiness again when Mrs. Pollock had more children, 2 more girls. But something was strange about these children. They knew all about their dead sisters' lives. They knew about their school, their friends, and even their toys. When the girls were older, their parents sometimes found them crying. When cars drove quickly along the road, they screamed. All of this stopped when the girls became older. After that, they couldn't remember any of it. Experts still can't say why these things happened to the Pollock children. Crop circles. In the early 1980s, strange things started happening on English farms. There were many reports of large circles in fields. Crops were flattened, but they were still growing. The circles had beautiful shapes inside. The first crop circles were seen on small farms. They didn't become well known until later in the 1980s. When more crop circles were seen, scientists were called in. They were very interested in the beautiful shapes. The shapes weren't simple. Some experts thought that perhaps they were made by an unknown intelligence, by aliens. Many of the circles were found near ancient places like Stonehenge. This added to the interest in aliens. but other scientists disagreed. They thought they were made by strange winds. By the end of the 1980s, crop circles were very famous. But were they made by aliens or winds, or were people just playing games? Some people thought that the shapes were an ancient language. They read predictions in the circles. In 1990, many more crop circles were reported, with some of the most beautiful shapes. People from other countries came to England to see them. Filmmakers waited in fields at night and tried to film the circle making. But they were never able to see it, only the finished circles. Crop circles were a bigger mystery than ever. Who was making them? How were they making them? And why? In 1990, it was discovered that ordinary people were making some of the circles. Two of these people were artists, Doug Bauer and Dave Chorley. Their circles were called the Doug and Dave circles. Experts wanted to be sure that people really could make these. £15,000 was offered to the person who could make the best crop circle. Some beautiful shapes were produced. This proved that ordinary people could make crop circles. Many experts lost interest then. But every year, new crop circles are seen. Many crop circle makers can explain some of these new shapes. They are so perfect, too difficult to draw on paper. How can someone make these beautiful shapes in the short summer night? Why hasn't anyone ever seen a person making a crop circle? The mystery continues. Other mysteries. In some of the Stranger Earth mysteries, surprising things fall from the sky or come out of the ground. Sometimes there is a sudden, unexplainable change in the weather. There are many more stories like these, but not many answers. It's raining. In 1985, in Texas, small fish fell into a man's back garden. When he went outside, hundreds more living fish fell out of the sky. Thousands of frogs fell during heavy storms in Birmingham, England in 1954, in Cannes-Plage, France in 1977, and in Arkansas, US in 1973. In England in 1987, sand rained from the sky 4 times. Scientists tested the sand. They discovered that it was from the Sahara. Animals and stone. In 1960, workers were breaking stones when they found small frogs inside, some living and some dead. One scientist said, "They've probably been in the rocks for thousands of years. Some of their mouths have grown shut. People could see their hearts moving through their thin skins." Scientists can't explain why some of the frogs were still alive. Strange lights. In January 1984, a ball of light flew through a Russian plane, above the frightened passengers. It then broke into 2 parts, formed a ball again, and suddenly disappeared. Ghost lights are moving balls of light that change color. They are only seen away from cities. They disappear if you go near them. Many people think they are ghosts. They are only seen in places where people have died in terrible ways. Reports of these strange lights have come from Britain, the US, and Japan. Weather changes at 7:30 a.m. on July 7, 1987. The temperature in the American town of Greensburg, Kansas went up 11 degrees Celsius in 10 minutes, from 24 degrees Celsius to 35 degrees Celsius. No one has found a reason for this. In March 1978, workers in a field in France heard a very loud noise and the earth shook. The noise came from the next field. They ran to the field and found a very large hole in the ground. In the hole was a 25-kilo piece of ice. The ice stayed in one piece for an hour. The Siberian Mystery. In the early morning of June 30, 1908, a very large ball of fire came from the sky and hit the Tunguska River Valley in Siberia. In seconds, everything for 65 kilometers was destroyed. Farmer Sergei Semenov was 80 kilometers away, but he saw a very large light in the sky and felt terrible heat. It almost burned his shirt off his back. Suddenly, a very large ball of fire covered most of the sky. Then everything went black. When scientists visited the Tunguska Valley after this, they couldn't believe their eyes. dead cooked animals were still standing. There were no living trees or plants of any kind. The Tunguska River was boiling hot. Later, it was reported that people 70 kilometers away were thrown into the air. Scientists have tried to find out why this happened for almost 100 years. It is still one of the world's greatest Earth mysteries. It's all a mystery. Some scientists think Tunguska happened as a result of a black hole. Black holes are formed from stars that are much larger than our Sun. The center of the star is pressed until it breaks. In less than a second, it becomes a black hole. What happens then? Some experts think that black holes are the reason for some of the Earth's strange disappearances in places like the Bermuda Triangle. One thing is sure, black holes are the greatest mystery of space and time. We are discovering more and more about our world. But as we learn more, we have more questions. Many things about this world are still a mystery.